Okay, I think we are on. Hey, everybody, I'm going to fire up YouTube here so I can follow chat, and hopefully everyone can hear me. Okay. Tech Guy Brian, thanks for joining us. Stephen Sard, Vincent Hayes, Ryan Good, V-Dog, David Soulsby. Thanks for joining us. Yeah, Jay Hayes went live about a half hour ago, so I think a bunch of people will be over there, but we can do our own thing here. And got some notes that I'm going to cheat with. Okay. Esko, hello from Finland. Thank you for joining us. Give everybody a minute or two to get in here, which is good because I can get a little drink. Brent Chadwick, good morning. Duncan Yo-Yo, welcome back. Well, watching both streams at the moment. Yeah, I caught a few minutes of Jay's thing. More the that rain disaster that they thrust them into. I don't know if disaster is the word, but more of that situation that they what they did to him. Um, Alex, hello from Canada. Hello, thank you for joining us. And then okay, zooming around like a maniac today. So a little bit like with the brain, but we can get some things done. And I think because of Jay's broadcast and stuff, that a lot of people will be watching that. So we'll just get started on things. And I think the first thing that, yeah, Nick, yeah, I had this one scheduled, but some stuff popped up for Jay, and he went live about a half hour ago. So I think I'll give him a buzz and see if we can. I don't know, maybe we can always have different times. If not, this people can come back and watch mine later. Beto Red. Greetings from Venezuela. Thank you for joining us. Scott Bogfoot, thanks for coming. Okay, so the first thing, well, actually, the first thing was got the eFusion Duo DNA 200 with an iconic, and today I'm just doing back to that pineapple peach, just a little bit of that, but not being dumb enough to pair it with coffee this time. That did not go well. Thanks. Just gonna drink a little bit of water while I do that. Duncan Yo-Yo, no, 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 not at all, not at all. It's and it's certainly, it's not someone doesn't get kind of priority to go live or something like that. But it's always nice if we can schedule things around each other and stuff like that, because some people may want to see both live and on things. So we'll see what all that turns into. Uh, the first thing, it wasn't on the. I was about to say it wasn't on the menu, wasn't on the schedule. I was going to be talking about safety, but uh, the first thing, something that I popped up was this. And I don't know if you can see, read that, that it's a hazard here. What was the word again? Fire hazard. And this is a Samsung 25R coming out of, you can see the M, that's the Malaysia factory. And these are the new wraps for Samsung. And they are going the route of LG. They're going to be putting the warnings on the wraps. Now, yeah, there's been rumors about this that they were going to be doing that, and I wouldn't be surprised if the other manufacturers, Murata, Panasonic and Sanyo, I don't think as much. We don't use many of those cells. I wouldn't be surprised if Murata did, though. But expect Samsung, I think, to do more of this kind of thing, become more proactive like LG Chem is, and say, hey, not going to just stand back and let people do this. We're not going to do more subtle warnings. We're going to put things on the cells. And that makes it very tough for a vendor to carry those, because if they're selling a Samsung battery to someone they know is going to use it for vaping, and it says on it not to do that, that's bad. That puts them in a tough legal situation if there's ever an accident or any kind of problem. So I think some people now are having second thoughts about using LGs because of LG's push and that video and the warnings on the wraps. And now Samsung, I believe this was in Europe, first appeared. I don't know if they're doing this hard in America yet, but I think it's inevitable that start to happen. So thank goodness for Molly cells. They have two good ones. They don't have a huge product line for vapors, but they have two of the best cells on the market, the P26A and the P42A, and they're willing to sell openly to vapors. So thank goodness that is always going to be there, and we'll see what happens with some of the other things that are going on. Uh, Quick check here. Yeah, MGSV, pineapple and peach with coffee. Yeah, that's not recommended. Duncan Yo-Yo, I wouldn't be surprised. Well, certainly in the data sheets. And since the beginning of any marketing of lithium-ion batteries, they've warned in the data sheets and for the industry who were the users of these cells not to use them outside of a battery pack. But I think these companies are learning more and more and more that uh, their cells are being used outside of their intended purpose. Flashlight users, some drones, a couple of drones use loose cells. Well, certainly, vaping uses loose cells, and there are other smaller niche applications for it. And they're realizing, whoa, let's just let's spend the money and put the warnings on the cells themselves. Duncan Yo-Yo, yeah, yeah, like IMR Battery is saying, hey, just don't use them for vaping, and they got to. If the manufacturer says not to, they're gonna not to, and then it's just on us to say, well, okay, you told me not to do this, but I'm gonna do it anyway because I want to vape or I want to use an external battery vaping device, so I'm gonna buy these 18650s. And I would ask for anybody with a question to please put uh, @ battery space mooch at the beginning so I get this big bright red flag before your message and I can identify that as a question. It just makes it so much easier for me as opposed to having to read every single post. I can just jump down to the ones that are in red because it can be hard to catch up. We're going a little bit slower today because some other people are live and so we don't have as many people today, but on some days, chat's just going too fast for me to catch up and read everything with everyone's entries. So just having that at Battery Mooch, 2 words, helps out a lot. Stephen, sorry, Battery Mooch, where'd you get that shirt? This one was S- Spring Tea, I think, and uh, it's got no flux given. That's just for everyone. That's magnetic flux equation, and then something that engineers think is clever, but most people just go, huh? On things. Um, Armax Sabato, Mooch, maybe you can address this question. Running a battery down to around 3 volts, how much does it cause the battery to degrade? None at all. Well, anything above 2.5 volts helps the battery last a little bit longer than what the manufacturer said it would. So 3 is fine. That's fantastic. Matt Law, super chat. Thank you very much. From the personal electric vehicle community, we also thank you for all the critical safety information you provide. Thank you very much. Certainly, any of the super chat donations go straight into, they do not buy coffee and beer and pizza. They go into the expenses for mods, batteries, chargers, equipment upgrades, etc. So thank you. I appreciate that. Um, well, let's dive into before we get into more questions, regulated mod safety. And yeah, this is the thing. Mods, and we won't take a lot of time on this because I think a lot of know about it, but a lot of people say, hey, you don't have to worry about your batteries in a regulated mod because the device protects them. Well, that's not true. Devices protect themselves, and a couple of features like the low voltage cutoff for the battery, typically around 3.2 volts or something like that, which can help extend battery life. I mean, you can bring them down to 2.5 volts. These keep sliding today. There we go. Uh, Bring down 2.5 volts without any problems, but up at 3.2, it might extend battery life a little bit. So you don't have to worry about that. And in the short circuit cutoff they have, if there's a short and the atomizer devices, if the protection's working, will cut off and I'm not looking at chat, so don't send any questions while I'm doing this talk now. Uh, that short circuit cutoff can help protect the batteries. But the rest of protections like temperature, things like that are just to protect the device itself. There's only a couple of mods that actually detect the battery temperature. Most of them are for the device, the circuit board inside the mod, like the DNA that runs along this edge here. There's a circuit board. The temperature protection protects that. Now, what it can't protect from is and I'm checking my notes here just to make sure I'm on the right thing here. Okay, what it can't check, most of them is battery temperature, the actual temperature of the batteries. A couple do, like the Sigrelli Zephyr actually sets up a temperature sensor on each battery, which is incredible and expensive, but is very cool. And that'll be in my video that's coming up soon. No mod, regulated or unregulated, can protect you from bad battery wraps, um, from an internal defect, which is incredibly rare, but I do want to mention it, or from a battery that's been badly dented or it's been dropped a lot and it's damaged internally. Now, you might know about um, top damage, but just to make sure that everyone does, in a battery, and the big danger, what mods can't protect you from, let's see, there we go, is, you've got the wrap coming across the top, and then if we take off the wrap, you've got a ring. Usually it's white or black, and I want to force this into focus. Is it going to do it for me? I don't know. But if we take off this insulating ring, and now you've got the battery, this whole can is the negative, and this outer ring is negative, and the center contact is positive. That little point there, that 3 millimeters of spacing there, that's all it takes. If you bridge that with metal, that's all it takes to get a short circuit. So as you're putting it in and out of a device, if you've got, you know, the batteries going in here, that top contact, as you slide the batteries in and out, or charger, the top contact can bridge the positive and negative part of the battery. Here, if you have bad wraps or if the insulator's missing or any of the other horrifying damages I've seen, and short circuit the battery, and there's nothing the device can do to keep this battery from going to thermal runaway or possibly exploding. So that's critical to keep that top ring, keep the insulator, the top ring, excuse me, the insulating properties of the wrap intact, namely keep your wraps and ring in perfect condition. Also, another problem that regulated mod can't protect you from is damage on the side. And that's one that a lot of people don't know about. Almost no one really, I think, because most mods are hooked up in series. And if you've got a mod in series, you've got one battery, you've got typically one battery goes down, one battery goes up. You have 0 volts for the outside of the battery, a negative terminal, going up to 4.2 volts for one battery. That goes up to the negative and out, you get 8.4 volts. And that's two batteries in series in a regulated mod. Now, if they're sitting inside the mod like this outside, is at 0 volts. Now we come over to this one, 4.2 volts out and up. So this can, even though it's the negative for this battery, this can is sitting at 4.2 volts. So if these two cans touch, come together, oops, my chat messages are going over, and I have to of course, that one doesn't work, and we go into this one. Okay. If these two cans touch because there's damage on the sides of the wraps, or maybe up near the top, but the two cans touch, now what happens? You've got the positive of this battery connected to here, and we can, maybe fatten this up to here. And so the negative part of this battery is a 4.2 volts, and now we're coming here and connecting it to the negative of this battery. So the positive of this battery flows through the can of the other battery and back through, and that's a short circuit through this battery. So if you got two of them with damaged wraps, and they touch each other, the lower voltage of the two batteries gets short-circuited through the can of the other battery. This battery's fine. It doesn't even see the short circuit. This one gets short-circuited, and no regulated device can protect you from that because it's essentially happening outside of the device. It's in the sled. The circuitry has no idea what's going on there. Uh, and I see lots of my names being tagged, but I won't be able to read that for a bit. Uh, now, the something you also see people say is that cells can explode. Well, that's okay because the cells, excuse me, will get hot before they explode. Not for a hard short circuit, they won't. They can go in a couple of moments. Now, if you're just using them really, really hard and they're in danger of venting, just opening up the disc underneath that top contact. Let's see, does that go open? There's a disc underneath there, and that'll just split open, kind of like the top of a pull top beer can, where they pre-score it, so it's easy to pop it open. Same thing that happens in the top of the battery. And some of them, like this battery, the VapCell, is it going to? Yes, there we go. You can see a ring and the bottom, that's another vent. But I have doubts about that sometimes because if that's being pressed hard against in a mod, how's that ring supposed to open? So I wonder about that second venting structure in a device. But I don't have any data. I haven't seen anything about that to be able to say one way or another. But if you're just using a battery really, really hard, then what can happen is eventually enough pressure from the electrolyte, the liquid, boiling increase the pressure inside the battery, and it just opens up, get a little bit of liquid leaking out. Smells terrible, distinct chemical odor. I think it's kind of a slimy feel. You may feel it around the top or smell it around the top. That venting, that typically makes the battery very hot, and you can get a warning before that happens. But for thermal runaway and the battery possibly exploding from a short circuit, that can happen very quickly. Don't say, "Oh yeah, yeah, Mooch," but if there's a, those two batteries touch, or my wraps are bad and I slide it in or something and it gets short circuited at the top, I'll find out. No, because if that was true, then how come people end up having their batteries explode on them in a mech or something like that? It can happen very quickly. Um, there's things we can do to help. We don't have to go crazy. We don't have to go, oh my God, I don't want to work this hard just to, I just want to freaking vape. I understand. But just in the back of your mind, a couple of things you can do if you have a regulated mod, just to, keep anything from happening. A couple important things are just use batteries that you've bought together as a set and you've married together as a set and you charge them together. Namely, they're always going to be running around the same voltage. That's not a big safety thing. It's certainly a performance thing, but it's something you can do to help this vape for longer before charging, but also keep your safety up just a little bit more. One battery isn't going to, you're not depending on the protection electronics of the device to keep one battery from going too low because you've got a married set and hopefully they're coming down at the same time. Certainly, keeping your wraps and the top ring in perfect condition at all times. Don't If you get a scratch and you see metal or something like that, you don't even have to go online somewhere and ask, "Oh, is this a problem?" Well, yeah, of course it's a problem. Is it a huge dangerous issue? We don't know because we don't know your setup. So don't use that battery. If you have to, put some electrical tape over it or something, but rewrap the cell. And if you're comfortable with that and you understand that a bare battery, you have to be very careful with that thing. You don't take off the wrap and the ring and say, "Oh, I can't do this right now. I'm going to put it in my pocket and wrap it later." No, just as long as you understand how to do rewrapping carefully, then you're fine. And Mike Vapes had a rewrapping video, and a whole bunch of them online. You can check. Other things you can do to help is I recommend external charging, not charging via the USB port, even if it's supported, and it's important because a regulated mod may come with a USB port, but it may be really just set up for firmware upgrades and not for every single day charging that. These are delicate little ports. If you're using it, put the cable in straight, don't just yank it out. Uh, Try to make that connector last for a while. They're not using the highest quality connectors in the world. Most companies are just banging out millions of mods. And so be nice to it if you're doing internal charging. But if you have an external battery mod, recommend using an external charger because, well, you can monitor the temperature of the battery. And if it's a decent charger, you can get one that doesn't heat the batteries up in addition, with its own charger related heat. You can select what level, like charge, at half an amp when you have the time, and go to 2 amps when you're in a rush, where if you charge it in here, it's whatever rate this has. Typically, these will heat up a battery, and because it's inside here, they're next to each, well, I guess on a charger, they're next to each other too, but they're next to the circuit board and you're getting warm, where a good charger won't heat up your batteries. And you can also get chargers that will let you track the capacity going back into the battery, even test for some other things. And that can help a little bit to track how the battery is performing over time, whether maybe it's time to replace the battery or not. Like you think it's not lasting as long, well, some of these testing charges, the analyzing charges, can tell you, oh, hey, yeah, you went down to 0% last time and you put back in 1800 milliampere hours. Well, this time I only put back in 1500. And you're like, oh, yeah, it's not running as long. Maybe I should replace these. Um, the thing you can do last, I think, is just not use chargers and mods that damage your wraps, because that's begging for trouble. Now, if you bought a mod and it's damaging your wraps, odds are you're not going to throw away the device or the charger just because it's damaging the wrap. But please, at least check it every single time before you put it in and after you take it out. Check the wraps and stay on top of replacing the wraps for these, because they're a lot better than they used to be, but some devices really do beat up um, the wraps and make it hard to keep your batteries in good condition. And that's most of what I had for regulated devices and battery safety. There's not a lot. It's stuff to keep in the back of your mind. Namely, just don't use janky batteries, and be careful with the charging if you charge internally. And just realize that your device can't protect you from everything with the batteries, even if they have lots of protection. Most of the protection is for the device itself. Now let's take a little look at what some of your questions might be, and I can put the cap on this. Was this? Yeah, this thing, I thought it was used. It's brand new, and it's just completely dry, even with the cap on. Okay. Go back up a little bit here. B-Dog, is potting 18650 e-bike packs a good idea, or is it better not to be cased in epoxy? Well, B-Dog, the problem is, what happens if a cell has to vent or go into thermal runaway? If it's potted, you've created a pipe bomb on there. Now, if you're saying, well, hey, maybe, I just want to put the bottom half inch of the cells, pot the bottom half inch of the cells to hold them. That's something you can do, but I would normally recommend, one of the lattice type structured cell holder kind of things that you can create, or you just do the classic, spot weld everything together, then shrink tape and shrink wrap the heck out of it. But that makes replacing a cell a nightmare. Some of the what is VRUZ, VRUZ, where you can, create your own connectors in whatever shape you want to hold all the cells. Normally, I'd recommend something like that because it's easier to replace the cell and you can vent out the top and or bottom. Some are bottom vented cells. Tobias Ripper. Some Vaporessos have screws on the cradle of the battery. Sometimes these get loose and rub against the wraps. The screws make contact the board's negative lead. Yeah, imagine the rest. Have screws on the cradle of the battery. Oh, okay. Like the screws holding down the battery sled or the cradle for the cells. That I can see. Yeah, certainly if there's any metal that's impinging on the batteries or anything like that from the regulator, some devices have an exposed regulator circuit board right next to the batteries. You don't want anything coming out and touching the battery, maybe causing a short circuit there. Spit roast. Battery mooch. If a single battery regulated mod is dropped and the positive contact is dented, thus making contact with the vent ring under it, what is likely to happen? Well, they're both at the same voltage, but if it comes down that far and it's touching the venting disc, it could open the vent disc, which would expose the internals to air. The electrolyte would leak out, and the battery dries out, and the battery is ruined. But if the top contact is dented, it now could interfere with the opening of the venting disc. Now, for simple venting, where it can open half a millimeter and do its job, releasing that little bit of pressure, okay, maybe that's not a problem. But if the battery goes in a thermal runaway and it's trying to eject its contents and huge amounts of smoke and everything out, having that top contact block the bottom contact, block the venting disc from opening all the way, could lead to significantly higher pressures in the cell. Now it may decide, well, if you're not going to let me, vent out what I need to vent out and throw a runaway, the crimp ring around the top here, the crimp can open up and it can eject its contents, but almost explosively. It becomes a much more energetic event, or it just explodes out the side. Never use dented top because it can interfere with the ring, and never use a dented bottom battery because that now pushes metal up against the spiral of positive and negative layers, and you can short circuit the battery internally. Just dented batteries, no damage is acceptable to the manufacturers. We each have to decide when it's a danger or not because there's no data we can look up. Oh, 1.2 millimeters on the Samsung 25R, that's the limit. There's no data there. We just, if anyone asks me, hey, is this okay? I don't even have to look because I just go, no, any damage is not okay. You have to decide when you think it's too dangerous because I don't know. There's no information to have me go, that's bad or not bad. So I have to err on the side of safety and go, any damage is bad. Scott Bogfoot, Battery Mooch, silly question. No, 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 no. Is it possible, with a bit of built-in infrastructure, to store energy in natural landscapes such as sand dunes? I know it's out there. Now, Scott Bogfoot, are you talking about within like the sand itself, or are you talking about taking battery racks and just building battery storage centers within natural features, like in a cave, or you dig out a sand dune, put in 50,000 batteries in racks and then cover it back up again. Uh, R. Maxwell Sabato. Um, so in a single cell mech, can you explain how a tear in the negative of the sidewall or bottom negative side of the battery can be dangerous or it is not? Well, any wraps in any mech, any device ever, anywhere is dangerous. It depends how the mech is wired up, and my brain is fried enough today that I may not get it right. It's really just setting up. I'm not going to get the drawing it properly, but instead of having it go through the button, but going directly through the sidewall, you can have a short circuit depending on the battery orientation as soon as you press the button or as soon as you put in the battery. I'm sorry, I'm not able to answer your question well. For me, that's one I always have to stop and think really, really carefully because battery orientation is very important. And I'm trying to think of the design of the battery, but any tear in any device is really bad. It just don't let it happen. In some things, in a mech, it can result in either an auto fire situation, or depending on one orientation of the battery, and the other orientation, it can do a short circuit of the battery. One's not as bad, but it's bad. The other one is catastrophic. So tears anywhere on any side are just not good for a battery. Beto Red, a Samsung 30T battery can be used in a mech with zero point 0.2 ohm coils? Question. Run the Ohm's law equation. I do not do Ohm's law math for anybody because this is something as a mech user you have to know how to do before you ever touch a mech. You must understand Ohm's law. Everyone hates it. No one wants it. You did math in school. I know you never want to have to do this again. But it's a simple equation, and this is your safety. Never trust me or anyone else to go, oh, okay, that's within the radio of something. You've got a 35 amp battery, just make sure Ohm's law tells you the zero point 0.2 ohm build pulls less than 35 amps, and then you're fine. Beto Red continues with, I have a VTC6 battery that charges relatively quickly and has lost power. Why is this? It depends on how many cycles the battery's gone through or how much abuse it's gone through during use. If you're using it at a mech, it's very abusive of VTC6. They're a poor choice for those because if they're 15 amp batteries, and well, unless you're a low power mech user, uh, they just don't hold up to the abuse like a molycelmide or VCC5A or the Samsung 30T or 40T. It could be reaching the end of its life. So the internal resistance of the battery has gone up. So there's a lot of sag. So it just looks like it's losing its power very, very quickly. Esco RH, most durable battery wrap. Somebody had some polycarbonate battery wraps, incredibly durable, but much thicker than normal wraps. You have to be careful. Durable wrap is usually a thicker wrap, and that can be a big problem. Like for this Effusion Duo, Thin wraps are already a tight fit. I could never use a thick, durable wrap, so I always have to keep an eye on pulling things in and out of this one. Um, I don't know who makes very, very durable wraps. ODB wraps fit in a lot of things, but they don't feel thick, but they've always held up for me. I haven't tried to compare like the wraps you might get from IMR batteries and other ones. Going down. AC, greetings from Portugal. Hello, thank you for joining us. If you have a question, put my name in the beginning. I think I'm seeing questions that don't have my name in the beginning. R. Maxwell Sabato. I often get little burn marks, which appear to be a small 2-3 millimeter circular char under the wrap of my single cell mech batteries. Wraps are pristine. Burn marks, or could they be rusting or a deposit oxidizing into something brown? Are you sure it's a char mark and not fluid left over from the drawing process of the can? Because the can is a flat disc of metal, and then they squeeze it so hard it turns into this tube. I'm tending to think it's probably that because a char mark through pristine wrap wouldn't happen. You'd get some kind of burn hole through the wrap to cause that. Stefan Sard, can you explain why building very low builds on regulated devices can be equally as dangerous as doing so on a mech? SAR under depression. Well, resistance doesn't matter on a regulated device. You've got, as long as the device can fire it, the resistance doesn't affect anything. Now, the device has to change how it operates, change what voltage it outputs to the coils and stuff like that. But you don't have, it doesn't change the battery current on there. If I've got a zero point 0.1 or zero point 0.5 ohm coil in a regulated device and it can fire both, let's say that's within its ratings, that and I'm firing both at 100 watts, let's say, the battery current to the zero point 0.1 coil and to the zero point 0.5 ohm coil is almost exactly the same for both those setups because it's 100 watts. The battery is connected to the regulated circuit board. Regulated circuit board is set to 100 watts no matter what coil you put on it. So the battery only sees this 100-watt request for power from it. It doesn't see anything there. So there's really no, um, it's not dangerous inherently in any type of way to have a low resistance build. If your device can fire a 0.05 coil and you have a power setting that doesn't exceed the rating of the battery, then as long as everything else is working in the mod, you're fine. There's no difference in a risk level between that 0.05 and a zero point 0.5 on that regulated mod, as long as the battery is being used within its rating. Matt Law, oh, you second Stephen's question. Some are under the impression, and Stephen Sard said, some are under the impression that regulated equals safe. Not safe, and that's what this is what the theme of what today was, but the resistance of the build, as long as it's within the rating of the device and the power you use, power setting you have is within the rating of the battery, then you're fine. It doesn't matter what the resistance of the build is. Beta Red, Mooch, charging a battery in low mod 300 milliamp is good every time or eventually? Thank you and sorry for all the questions. No problem. Charge a battery in low mod. I think you're asking about is charging a battery at low current, like 300 milliamps, good to do all the time. It will never hurt a battery to charge at lower current levels. Depending on the battery, you can see an increase in battery life if you charge at like 300 milliamps versus, well, certainly 3 amps or 300 milliamps. You'll see, hopefully, uh, if you're not abusing the battery otherwise, you'll see an increase in battery life by charging 300 milliamps. The battery's not getting as warm, so it can last longer. Now, the difference between 300 milliamps and 500 milliamp charging, or 300 and 1,000 milliamp, 1 amp, I don't know if you're going to see a difference in the overall battery life. Let temperature be your guide, though. If your battery's getting warm in the charger, but more than a little bit warm, then go to a lower charge rate if you want absolute maximum battery life. Los Palos, what about charging in a parallel battery mod? Um, well, the two batteries are going to, if they're in parallel, they're going to be at the same voltage all the time, so they will charge together. So that's not an inherent problem, the dual parallel. part of it isn't going to be any kind of problem, as long as the charging circuitry is working fine and everything else is going okay. The fact that they're in parallel actually keep the voltages balanced, whereas two batteries in series, you need a balancing circuit that works in the device to keep those two batteries at reaching 4.2 volts at the same time. Let's see. Orthodium. I have an electric scooter based on MJ1 cells. Those are LGs for everybody else. Will they no longer be available going forward? I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen. I think I think there'll always be loose cells available. It's really who's selling them. Are they going to have to be ordered directly from China because China won't care what LG says, or will they still be available from some vendors in the United States or in the EU? And this applies to LGs. Maybe Samsung is getting more proactive now. Well, they are. How far will they go? It really depends on what the enforcement ends up being. How many vendors start to go, whoa, we're out. They're getting more proactive. We just can't sell these things with warnings on them. It makes us liable for anything that happens. To say, hey, you're going to vape? Okay, here's a battery that says not to be used for vaping. For someone who's putting it into a pack or not using it for e-cigarette use, there may be more options from you. So much of this is going to flesh itself out in the next couple of years, but potentially quite serious and limited availability. Um, there's always going to be China, I think, and there's always going to be Molly cells, but they may not fit for what you're looking for, like the MJ1, which can be great. It's a decent actually, it's a good performing ultra high capacity battery and can be great for something like e-bikes and stuff like that. This This motherfucker here. This motherfucker. Fugger? Fugger. Looks like Fugger. I'm pathetic with names. Um, what's the name of the circuit type method used to get 7 or 8 volts from a single 4.2 volt cell? It's called typically boost, a boost circuit or a boost regulator. It's often called a step up regulator. Step down takes 4.2 volts and guess what? Brings it down to low voltage. Step up or boost will make it higher than whatever the battery voltage is. If the battery voltage drops to 2.5 volts, it might have to boost it up higher. Um, you also can get what they call buck boost or step up, step down. Namely, it's a complex regulator circuit that can take any battery voltage it's rated for and turn it into any output voltage that it's rated for. Namely, it can uh, take 4.2 volts down to 3 volts and it could take 3 volts and bring it up to 5 volts or something like that. But the more complex, more expensive. So you don't see it often in mods, but it's very common in power supplies. Hussam Humaid or Humaid or Humaid. If I use a single regulated mod firing at 80 watts, battery rated at 5 amps, what's the issue that can happen? Explosions, fire, end of life within a 3-block radius. Probably they'll have to evacuate the city and cordon it off for the next 200-300 years or something from the contamination. No, no. What can happen? Uh, well, number one, you're stressing the living hell out of that cell. 80 watts. It's any cell, even a Samsung 30T at 80 watts, it's being stressed hard. So at a 5 amp, you're using it way beyond its rating. You're going to get terrible performance, very limited vaping time, and it's significantly increasing the risk of that battery venting and possibly going to thermal runaway. Because 80 watts, and what are you closing in on 30 amps, 25, 30 amps? That's high enough where that battery might start to go, I think I'm being short circuited. And then you've got issues that don't just don't go over the ratings like that. Not at that kind of huge level. Stephen Sard, I get that, but some are running a 0.11 build at 200 watts. Okay, well, Stephen, if they're using dual 30 Qs, each one can take 45 watts. So it's 90 watts before you hit the rating. It doesn't matter what build they're using. Let's say they're running a 0.5 build at 200 watts or a 0.11 build at 200 watts. The resistance doesn't matter. What matters is they're running 2 Samsung 30Qs at 200 watts, 100 watts each, 30 over 30 amps each on a 15 amp battery. That's the problem. But if they had, let's say, two 30Qs running at 80 watts with 90 watts, the rating of the battery, two 30Qs of 45 watts each, that's 15 amps each. You triple the rating of the battery to get roughly the wattage it can handle. So the 15 amp Samsung 30Q can be run at about 45 watts before you hit its rating for two of them at 90 watts. It doesn't matter if they have a 0.05 build or zero point 0.5 build. That 90 watts is what those 230Qs can handle. What matters is, in your example, that if they're running 230Qs at 200 watts, it doesn't matter what the resistance is. They're running, if they put in a zero point 0.5 build at 200 watts, that's no better than a 0.11 build at 200 watts in a regulated mod. The batteries are still being run way too hard, and they're going to perform like crap, even if they don't care about the safety. 230Qs at 200 watts are going to perform miserably, very short vaping time. They'll get down to like 60, 70%, and then the SAG will just force them to change the batteries out. Scott Bogfoot, silly follow-up. In the sand itself, not silly at all. I'm not aware. Technically, I bet you it's possible to get some kind of electrical positive, negative poles going within sand or within a rock structure, something like that. I have no knowledge of that. I think it would be so site specific. And what happens if it rains? Or what happens if there's leaching or runoff from someplace that changes the electrical conductivity of the structure? It may be possible to store electrical energy in a natural feature. I'm just not aware of the research or what they might be able to do, but I can see that being so site specific. Uh, in the end, it could almost be easier to just say, look, we're just going to, dig up that sand dune, put in 100,000 batteries and cover it back up nice and pretty and have something that really works well and can handle rain and everything else. Chantel Dowling. So if I'm understanding correctly, the resistance of the build and regulated mod doesn't really matter because the mod will not fire if the battery cannot handle it, correct? No, no. The mod has no idea what the battery's rating is. The resistance doesn't matter on a regulated mod because if you change the resistance on a regulated mod, the battery current does not change. If you've got your mod set to 100 watts with a zero point 0.1 build and you take that out and put a 0.5 ohm build on it, you're drawing almost exactly the same amount of current from the battery because it's the wattage setting that affects it. The battery is not connected to the coil. It has no idea what the resistance is. It only sees the wattage request from the mod. So your battery, the wattage setting is what you have to worry about matching the battery's capability. Now, the mod will, if you've got a battery being used way beyond its rating, the battery sag will tell the mod, whoa, okay, the mod will just go, okay, you hit 3.2 volts or whatever the cutoff is, I'm going to stop. Uh, that's what can help sort of protect your battery. But in the meantime, until that happens, your battery's being stressed all the heck. So for your question, it has no idea what the rating of the battery is. It's your wattage that affects it. The coil resistance, it doesn't know if you're turning on a light bulb, a coil, a motor, a vibrator, a flashlight. It has no idea. All it knows is, hey, the battery just sits there going, oh, you want 100 watts? Okay. You want 100 watts? Okay. In the meantime, you could be swapping out coils, devices, powering up heaters, anything. The battery just sees that 100-watt request. Let's go. Is it possible to put battery voltage display on a mech? Wouldn't be a mech anymore, but yes, you can do that. There are accessories. You can screw, it's a device on top with a 510 here and a 510 female on the top. You screw it on the top of a mech, then you screw in your atomizer, and now you can read the voltage, at least the voltage point, not of the battery, but the voltage that is reaching the atomizer. Namely, it can read the voltage of where it's located in mech to reader to atomizer. I could tell you the voltage there, but it adds, I don't know, inch and a half or something to the length of your mech. Usam, who made dicodes outputs 11 volts from 8650. How is that being done? That is using a boost regulator circuit or step up regulator circuit. If they're using one or two 18650s, you can essentially they take current from the battery, they chop it up, and then you pulse it a few thousand times to a couple 100,000 times a second. You send these pulses out through a couple of components that hugely increase the voltage because of the way they work with creating and collapsing magnetic fields. You can generate huge spikes, voltage spikes, and those spikes are passed over 10,000 times a second to 200,000 times a second. They're passed over to components that smooth it back out into a steady DC signal, but at a higher voltage. And that is what that is then sent out to your coils. So it's with this, essentially, it's like a pulse width modulation, but it's done in a very specific way with specific components to be able to bring the voltage up or bring the voltage down. If you want to bring the voltage up, you put a lot of high voltage pulses together and then smooth it out. If you want to bring the voltage down, you can space the pulses way out. So when you smooth a bunch of rare pulses, the average voltage is very, very low, and you get this low DC voltage, naming it step down. Sorry if that was too complicated. That's something you could talk about for an hour just for that one topic. So just checking time here. AC, battery mooch. The batteries are married, rotate with other ones, and were always charged in the charger. But I'm not sure what you're referring to. If you do like a part one, part two, you have to rephrase the whole thing because I won't remember, especially if I didn't notice your question the first time. Matt Law, does the resistance of the coil on a regulated mod affect the capacity of the batteries at all? It affects the run. No, the resistance of the coil won't affect the capacity or the runtime. It's your power setting. Again, resistance doesn't change anything. Your power setting will change the effective capacity of the battery or how long the battery runs. A 3,000 milliampere hour battery at 5 watts could deliver close to 3,000 milliampere hours, probably 2,500 because it's going to cut off at 3.2 volts. But a 3,000 milliampere hour battery at 100 watts is probably only going to give you 100 milliampere hours because the battery sag is going to bring the voltage down so far, the mod's just going to go, I can't get anything more out of this thing at 100 watts. You're done. So that turns a 3,000 milliampere hour battery into 100 mAh. I'm going to start saying mAh just to shorten time. Um, Does it affect any aspect of the batteries by using a super low ohm or high ohm coil? Again, no. Coil resistance does not affect battery capacity or battery current, except for tiny differences due to efficiency of the regulator circuit at different power levels. The coil resistance doesn't affect anything because the coil is not connected to the battery. Battery is connected to the regulator circuit, and your regulator is operating at whatever wattage you're setting it to. Scott Buckfoot, why are lead acid cells still a thing? They're cheap. They're dirt cheap. There's an infrastructure to handle them and sell them. You can get, they're great in terms of resistance to certain colds and certain ways of operating. And you have an infrastructure set up for them. It's if you want to put lithium-ion cells for starting a car, that's great. But now I need all kinds of electronics to balance multiple cells. I'm not going to get a lot of capacity compared to 50 amp hour car battery. I'm going to need a lot of lithium-ion cells in parallel. I'm going to need a bunch in series. Now I need protection for voltage spikes because they're not going to be able to handle that as well. So lead acid, there's still applications that they're great for, but most of it is cost. They've been made for decades, so they're just so cheap to make compared to having this protected lithium-ion battery pack. Torsten Mears, are there additional dangers when using cells in a single cell setup that have age and, for example, only percent of the original capacity left? Well, theoretically, yes. All the manufacturers, not all, but typically at 80% of capacity, namely you've lost 20% of your runtime, they say, okay, you've reached end of life, replace it. As these cells age, their internal resistance goes up, which means they can run hotter even though you haven't changed the way you've used them. Also, depending how you're charging them, if you ever charge them in the cold, if they're being charged very hard, if they're being charged to higher than normal voltage, all those can lead to formation of metal in places inside the battery. You may have heard the term dendrites, little spikes can form. If it's been discharged at too low voltage, the copper contact can dissolve and put copper where it shouldn't be when you recharge it. All that over time can start increasing the risk of using the battery. So it's not like, well, I still can get, you know, half-hour runtime out of this battery. And we're used to run 8 hours. So I'm not replacing it. I can still get a half-hour vaping out of it. I'll just replace, pull it out every half hour and put another one in. No, replace them. Um, if the battery's running hotter, if the battery's getting weirder, if anything's going on, it's time to get a new one. But I can't give you any kind of definition of when to replace a battery recommendation other than what the manufacturers say. When it reaches about 80%, replace it. But the first thing Vapor's asking is, well, how do I know it's hit 80%? We don't unless we have a charger and we're measuring down to 2.5 volts. So it's really, hey, it's starting to change. It's running hotter. The wraps are getting beat up. It's getting dented. It's been a couple of years. Yeah, yeah. Batteries are dirt cheap for what they give you. Just buy new ones from a trusted, known vendor. SJM 72. In a regulated mod, the more the batteries run down, the more amps they have to put out, correct? Yes, that's correct. Because a regulated mod works by power, let's say of 100 watts. So voltage times current is 100 watts. So if the voltage goes down, in order to get the 100 watts, you can't make 100 watts anymore with a low voltage battery. So the device will pull more current from the device to make up for that. So the voltage times current still makes 100. So as the voltage goes down, it's got to pull more current. So if you've got a battery, maybe, pulling 15 amps from it with a fully charged battery, well, you might be pulling 25 amps from it or whatever the number is when the battery's down near the cutoff point. So that's why I always say, hey, when you're calculating what you want to do for how much power, excuse me, a battery can handle, is you want to use the lowest voltage of the device. So if you've got, like if you're calculating how much current a battery will have to supply, you want to use the lowest voltage of the device. So if you've got 100 watts, you want to divide that by 3.2 volts. The lowest voltage typically in the regulated mod, not divided by 4.2 volts, a fully charged battery, but take 100 watts divided by 3.2 volts, there's the current. And then maybe add 10% more because the regulator is 100% efficient. If you do 100 watts divided by 4.2 volts and you get a current level, well, that's great. But that's only going to be for the first hit in a device because the voltage still has to drop some. I hope that made sense. Hussam Humaid, Dicode's chips have cut off at 2.5 volts changeable. Is it horrible to do that on the Sony VTC6? No. Every battery we use is rated down to 2.5 volts. There are lithium ions rated 2.75, 2.8 volts, but those are rated under 5 amps. I'm assuming nobody uses those. So you can go down that low, but you can get a little more battery life, maybe set it to 2.8 or 3. If you're a really high power vapor, then it can help you with battery sag if you set it down to like 2.8 or something like that, because then it won't cut off when the battery sags and you can get some more vaping time. Because if it sags down to 2.8 and you're at high power levels, if you let the battery rest, it'll probably go up to 3.2 or something. That's what you're really discharging it down to, not what the sag says on it. So changing the cutoff from 3.2 maybe to 2.8, that's okay. Bounce back up to 3.2. You're at a level that can extend battery life a little bit. 2.5, that's okay, but there's just very little extra capacity between 2.8 and 2.5. So I usually recommend 2.8 or 3 for a cutoff. Tover Yonder, I'm confused. With series, you double volts, and with parallel, you double capacity. So I can run 150 watts with two P26A in parallel. Series or parallel changes nothing in a regulated mod. The same battery current and the same capacity, whether you run batteries in series or parallel in a regulated mod. It's only with mechs where series and doubling of voltage doesn't double capacity, and in parallel where you double capacity and current, but you don't double the voltage. In a regulated mod, it doesn't matter. Uh, it's really this is where watt hours is so important because it tells you how the battery can form, no matter how you connect it. If you've got two batteries in series, the device can run at half the current because you've got more voltage to make power with. So it doesn't need to draw as much current out of the device. So let's say let's say you've got 100 watts and you've got two batteries in series. Well, it's 50 watts for each battery. And then you can do the equation to figure out how much current that is. If I have two batteries in parallel, it's still 50 watts per battery. It's still the same amount of current being drawn from each battery. So it doesn't matter whether they're put in series or parallel. Divide the total wattage by the number of batteries, and that's how much power per battery. And now you can divide by 3.2, then add a little bit more, and you can figure out how much current per battery. Go to episode 3 of my Minding Your Mod series. It talks about calculating battery current for a regulated mod. The MRP 105. Someday I want to just have people tell me the origin of their names. I think that'd be a cool, well, it'd be really boring or really cool. I think that'd be a cool hour someday. Uh, if the gold plating is peeling off from the 510 pin of my RDA, can it cause a noticeable voltage drop on a mech since stainless steel is not as conductive? It won't change anything. Uh, think of it this way. Uh, you've got, in fact, the resistance of a gold-plated pin of any metal will go down if the plating peels off because now there's less metal between you and the battery. Let's say you've got a battery, gold plating, stainless steel, and you go up to the coils. Well, no matter what, that gold has some resistance, even if it's low. So if you take away the gold, it's now lower resistance between you and the coils. Now, there's a maintenance issue. If you've got a gold-plated copper contact, now the copper can oxidize and the resistance can build up. So I'm assuming everything is kept clean. You're not losing anything by losing the plating. Platings are for maintenance only. Otherwise, they're a total pain in the butt. They offer nothing. They just keep you from being able to clean. It's great if the gold is intact and there's no arcing damage that will blow through the gold plating anyway. So why have it? It's really just a maintenance issue that until the arcing damage blows through the gold plating. Now, if you have a constant contact setup, gold plated 510, let's say on a hybrid mech, so the battery's touching gold here. You've got a constant contact button on the bottom that always touches the bottom of the button, and the contacts open and close further down. Those can both be gold because you can just clean it with alcohol. There's no arcing damage or anything like that. That's fantastic for it. But for where contacts are coming and separating, I hate to see plating because the arcing blows it away, and cleaning it, you're just going to be taking off more of the plating. Ron Titus, I'm just curious when we will get a battery from you. When either I can find one hell of a reliable factory that won't decide to change cells, what they wrap, Mooch cells they wrap, or when the technologies come far enough for, quote, safe battery, typically a solid state battery. I've talked to a couple of labs, but they're all at the stage now where, well, we can go over. We're not really in anybody's way, right? No one else is going live, so we can go for a little bit longer um, than the 1 hour. Mooch batteries. So I've talked to a couple labs, and they're like, we can do some prototypes, $250,000. Like, no, I'm not funding something. I'm not funding your battery development. If you have prototypes, send them to me so I can test them, and then I'll get you $1 million order if they meet my needs. But I'm not going to fund the commercialization of a laboratory stage solid state battery development thing. So I think it'll be other companies coming up with something to buy these, a car manufacturer, something like that, to come up with $10 million to say, yes, we'll fund this for 2 years because we want to use the solid state batteries in our new car. Um, I don't know. We may be a couple of years away before come up with something, depending. Something may change. It's really just finding a factory that has good sales, consistent, and really that's just the big manufacturers right now, and they're not going to touch me. And why should I wrap? In my brain, I'm thinking, how can I sell batteries? Like, let's say Samsung suddenly said, okay, yeah, Mooch, if you put a Mooch wrap on it, we'll sell to you. now I have to make it more expensive because it's number one, I have to make a profit for my time, and you have to pay for the rewrapping process. So why would people buy Mooch batteries that are, Samsung 30Ts? Why would buy a Mooch 30T when you can get a Samsung 30T for less? Now, there's something to say, okay, for Mooch, we know the grade, we know when it was manufactured, all the advantages of buying from Molicel. I don't know. I don't see much of a business case here because Vapours are very cost conscious, and I don't see them buying from me. But we'll see what the future holds. Motor Vapor, are you going to talk about lipos anytime soon? Well, ask a lipo question at any time, but I haven't. I get almost no questions about lipos from vapors, and that's what drives a lot of what I talk about in the power hours. Is the questions that I get asked the most, because by addressing it in the power hour, I can reach a lot of people and answer the questions in advance, and they don't have to each person come to me to get the question. AC, it's a pair of Samsung 30Qs. What is a Samsung pair? Okay, put your entire message again when you uh, when you come back to me again talking about something you spoke previously. You got to tell me what we were talking about before because I won't remember. It's a pair of Samsung 30Qs with about a year and a half discharging unevenly in my mods. Okay, should I retire them? If they're discharging evenly, all batteries discharge unevenly because every battery is different, and the mods aren't always accurate. The two different slots can read differently with the voltages. If there's a little bit of a difference and then that difference starts growing, that's a concern. But if you have brand new cells, now you're saying they're older, but I don't know if they were always a little bit uneven. If the unevenness is growing, then it's time to retire them because one of them or both, and one more than the other, are reaching the end of their life. Namely, its internal resistance is rising higher than the other one. Microfix, hey, what do you think about the BA 6010? That will bore everybody. It's an amazing product. He's talking about some of the test equipment that I have. Whether it's worth the money, if you're considering buying it, you have to do a lot of work with batteries to be able to, say, hey, I'll spend that kind of money on a piece of test equipment. Hussam, the dicode's cutoff is under load. I love you, man. You're doing so much for us. Shh, don't tell my girlfriend. She'll be jealous. Our relationship has to stay. I'm a DQ here. Thank you for the kind words. And yeah, for underload cutoff 2.8 volts, I usually recommend is a low to help survive. You don't need to do that if you're running at lower power levels, but if you're getting only down like 50% or 30%, you're getting frustrated, try bringing the cutoff down to 2.8 so you can vape a little bit further uh, with the sag pulling it down. Sebastian, battery Mooch, Mosh. Kind of like that, actually. Maybe a bit of a strange question, but people like Miles Dyson and others are supposed to be working on new kinds of batteries. I'm sure they are. You'd be amazed. There's hundreds of companies, if not thousands, working on new kinds of batteries in all different angles. Most of them, I believe, for near term, working on what they call solid state batteries or having sheets of the liquid inside will be solid. It will be a solid, and they have sheets of ceramic or glass in between the positive and negative part of the battery instead of plastic, so it can withstand higher temperatures. It's just safer overall, not safe, safer overall. I wouldn't be surprised if Dyson was doing that, but it's a lot of money. And typically, what they'll do is not do this in house themselves, but they'll team up with a university or with another company to co-develop. Namely, Dyson would say, "I've got $2 million. I could spend 1.9 million of it building my own facility, and then 100,000 actually developing something, or I can give $2 million directly to a university who already has equipment and has already started developing something, and have them develop something that'll work for me. Like I don't want to use, this battery off the market. I want to develop something perfect, exactly made for my thing, like what Tesla does. Their batteries are fairly normal, but they're tweaked perfectly for what Tesla wants to do with them. And Dyson could do the same thing. Motor Vapor, is it recommended to number the battery on a series device or to swap them between every time I put them in the mod? You never need to rotate batteries, ever, if they're being externally charged because they're both balance charge to 4.2 volts every single time. So for a mech, it does absolutely nothing. If you put them in a regulated device, and you always charge internally or via USB, and the internal charging circuitry doesn't work well, then you could benefit from swapping once in a while. But the odds of all that happening are so low that you just never need to rotate batteries. I don't know where all that came from. The whole thing, hey, you got to rotate your batteries. No, there's just no need to it, especially if you're external charging, because you bounce the batteries every single time you externally charge them. Tobias Ripper, is brass, not plated, good for 510 pin contacts? I like brass for contact because it gives you good conductivity, much better than stainless steel, not much worse than copper or silver. It's pretty easy to maintain. It doesn't oxidize too much if it's not plated. Then it's an easy scrub with a Scotch-Brite pad to get the oxidation off. So I like brass as a contact. I like silver too, not because it's much more much more conductive. It's a little more conductive, but you only got a little piece of metal there. It's just not making a big difference between silver or brass or copper in terms of just like a 510 pin or something. So I like silver because it's not going to oxidize easily. It'll sulfidize or whatever if there's sulfur in the air, but the oxidation will be very slow. So that I think it's even easier to maintain than brass. This motherfucker here, have you heard of graphene batteries? Yes. Is that solid state? No. Graphene batteries, the negative part of the battery uses carbon to store, when batteries charge, to store all the ions. And graphite is what's in the batteries we're using now. Graphene, because it is set up so beautifully with these layers that the ions can just slip between, graphene becomes an even better choice for efficiently storing lots and lots of ions in a very small space. Really expensive. There are only a few fully graphene anode or negative part of the batteries out there now. I think there can be more of them, but graphene's so expensive to make, it can be hard to justify buying a graphene battery for a lot of applications. Now, one of my previous power hours talked about hemp batteries, which when you heat up hemp very specific way to make carbon out of hemp, you get a structure about as good as graphene for storing ions. So there's another way to do things and at a much lower cost. So all this is going to be fleshed out. I think graphene will stay for niche applications where you need very tight control over things, and aerospace, military, and a graphene battery will be good. And for everybody else, they can use the hemp batteries or graphite batteries there. All the rest of the batteries, normal lithium-ion type operation. Motor Vapor, are you going to do a Minding Your Moss episode about lipos? Or do you plan on giving all data on power hours? Well, it all depends on what the topic is and what people are asking for. If it's something smaller, it'd be power hour. If there's a lot of stuff I need to put up on a board, like calculations and things like that, then it'll go into a Minding Your Moss episode. But just stream of consciousness, talking stuff, shorter topics will be addressed in power hours. So it really just what I would be talking about with lipos. The community would have to say, Mooch, can you talk about this? Can you talk about that? What about this? What about that? And you know, I start getting a lot of those requests, like all the other topics, then I'll do a Minding Your Mouse on it. Ron Titus, okay, let's get down and dirty. Samsung or Apple? Yeah. Scott Bogfoot, when was the last time you seen a B-sized battery cell? Wow, decades, decades. And back to Ron Titus, Samsung or Apple? Either one. Neither one is inherently superior. Um, Look at the features. You'll love some, you'll hate others, and it works. I started with Apple a long time ago, so I stick with it because I know it. And there's nothing inherently better with Android to make me change what I'm doing now. Once you've made an investment and the interoperability is still great and synchronization and everything, you just stay with it. There's nothing I would go, oh, yeah, it's worth starting over for me to go to Android or Samsung. Serge Melkonian, I have a question regarding my RigMod V3 and TwistedMesses 24 RDA with an LG HB battery, HB6 I'm guessing, which is 30 amps. When I have build around 0.18, the voltage drop is going down to 3.1 volts. That sounds about right. The HB6 is not a good mech battery. It's got a 30 amp rating, but it's a higher internal resistance battery. It's not great in a mech. It was our only choice for a long time for 30 amps because it had that high rating, but it wasn't a good power battery. Much better will be Samsung 20S. At 0.18, do the Ohm's law equation, see how much current you need. You might be able to use a moly cell, P26A, 25 amps, which will give you more capacity and still hit pretty hard. But the Samsung 20S is the hardest hitting 18650 out there, and what I recommend if you need a 30 amp rating for use in a mech. Let's go for a few more minutes. Moto Vapor. Does it matter if I rotate the batteries in a series mech while draining them? One battery always drains faster than a series mech. No, no, no. Position and device will never, ever affect which battery drains faster than the other in series. By definition, both batteries drain at exactly the same rate. It is impossible for one battery to be discharged at a different rate than another when in series. Rate, that does not mean they will discharge down at the same voltages because both batteries are different. If I'm drawing 10 amps from two batteries, one is always going to drain down a slightly lower voltage than the other. But that's the battery. That's the difference just between any two batteries you pick. One's we slightly different than the other. If it's up here or it's down here, that battery, because internally is always, let's say, is 2900 mAh instead of 3000 mAh, or 2950 instead of 3000, will drain down to a lower voltage before the other one does. But by definition, they're both drained at exactly the same current level because they're in series. There's only one path for the current to go through. So no, it doesn't matter if you rotate. It will make no difference. If it is, something else is going on. Sarah's Melconian, is this normal? Is what normal? Can I go down to 0.14 ohm with the same HB6 battery? Run the Ohm's law equation. I will not do that for anybody because every mech user has to know how to do that before they ever touch a mech. And you can check out my Minding Your Moz series, episode 2, if you want more information about that. Run the equation, see if 0.14 ohms is less than 30 amps. But that's a low resistance. You're using that battery hard, and it's just a battery that, while it has a 30 amp rating, is not good for high power uses. I would say for HB6, stay under 20 amps, stay at 15, 20 amps for efficient operation of that battery. Vans 1208. You didn't put battery mooch on there. I just happened to see it. Love to send you Stan's mech with unicorn vapes that has all silver constant contact. Hardest hitting mech that you own. You'd love to see me test it. I'm willing to test mechs. The silver isn't making it the hardest hitter though. It makes very little of a difference, the metal type itself. Once you have a decent amount of metal, what matters is the threads, the surface area, how much is actually the smoothness of the contact and stuff like that. But if it's the hardest hitting mech you own, then that's fantastic. Use it, enjoy it. That's great. Battery Mooch, best time to rewrap batteries, the power hour. 6 down, 2 to go. There you go. Greg Smith, sorry for the hijack. Do you have any plans of testing the Vindicator with the stock switch? I've already tested the Vindicator with the stainless steel switch. If that's what you mean by stock switch. They didn't send me the newer copper button assembly. I have to give them a buzz actually because I haven't done the giveaway yet for my patrons for the Vindicator. I would do another video if they sent me the copper button assembly, and then the Ruby I would do stainless steel and copper for that and compare the performance. Chris, I'm building an e-bike battery and I want to utilize cell level fusing. Can you suggest a method for testing fusing ratings of nickel strip? A dummy load? Yeah, you can just use stainless steel wire. Just buy a coil of. You don't even need vaping wire. You can just go to a hardware store and get stainless steel wire for hanging paintings, and just get a length of it. Use regulated mod to measure the resistance, and just find a resistance that you want to use to give you the current draw that you have, and then just get enough of a loop of wire, or you may need several loops in parallel that you're not melting the wire because you don't want to have to use cotton and juice and everything. So you may use a big long piece of wire, but then use 5 of those in parallel to bring the resistance back down again. And now it runs hot, but it's not going to melt. It's not going to get red hot. Cypec, or is it Chipec? Thank you for being here for us. I've learned so much from you and relayed the knowledge to many others. Keep up the good work. Thank you for the kind words. I'm glad my testing has been useful. Moto Vapor, do you make DIY? Or do you buy commercial e-liquids? Both. I do a basic, little bit of mint and 70 VG. That's what I do most of the time because if I'm stressed out and I need this motion, not this motion, that gets rid of a lot of the urge for me. And I'm not really tasting the juice because I'm stressed out. I'm still working on something. I'm not noticing, so I'll do that. But otherwise, I'd love a good treat, some great juice, commercial that I'll buy. But I don't do a lot of that. It's a lot of money. And if I'm not noticing the taste, then I'd rather do my super cheap, slightly minted 70 VG if I'm not going to notice it. Michael Dora, thank you for everything. Your teachings are amazing. Thank you. I'm glad you like them. Like them? That doesn't sound right. I'm glad it's useful for you. How much do you pledge on Patreon to be eligible for giveaways? Justin Vickers, it's $2 right now. I think that's going to go up because I think for anybody for the giveaways, they don't happen often, and I want I want a higher level to just be eligible to that, not just everybody to come in and say, for $2 a month, I can win a mod. So, it's $2 now, but I think that's going to go up to the $5 level. Scott Bogfoot, thank you, Battery Mooch. You're welcome. Phil Jones, now some internal LiPo mods are using USB-C for fast charging. Will charging a 2000 milliampere hour LiPo at 5 amps, so it can be charged in 25 minutes, cause damage or short life the LiPo? Well, if anything other than a little bit warm, more than 40, 45 C, you're shortening the life of the battery, no matter what the battery. But a lot of it depends on what the rating of that LiPo is, or whatever battery chemistry you're using. Some of them, like the Molicel P26A is rated up to 6 amps. That's going to shorten the life of the battery some, but it's rated very high. So a 3 amp charge on that may not be a problem. 5 amp, yeah. I would say, just guessing, yes, because they're not going to use some uber high power, ultra low internal resistance LiPo that can take massive 5 amp charge. So I'd say, yeah, you're shortening the life of the battery. But we do that all the time with our cell phones and our tablets and our laptops. And so the same thing will be happening with the mods. Most people will prefer the shorter charging time versus an extended life of the battery until they have to replace the whole device because of the battery. Greg Smith, yes, the test you did for WS. Test you did WS for the constant contact upgrade switch. Was wondering about the stock regular configuration switch. No problem. You can't test what they didn't send you. You're talking about the Vindicator? Stock regular configuration switch. I thought the one that I had gotten was the stock regular one. It's the one Kennedy had sent me, the stainless with the copper pin, but maybe I believe he had said that they updated to a copper housing instead of the stainless steel housing for the Vindicator 21. So I think maybe that's what you're referring to. Obi-Wan, what's up with that bent cap? What bent cap? This is a flat brim. I really wish I was smart enough to understand most of what you say when it comes to battery safety and amps and voltage. This is Tracy Thompson. Thank you for what you do, though. Vaping's community blessed to have you. Keep it up. Thank you, Tracy, for the kind words. I'm sorry that it's not making sense. But certainly, don't be afraid to ever ask a question privately or publicly and see explain something. A lot of my other videos go into more detail. Here, I'm kind of just banging through the person's question without setting up the big explanation of the background for it. I'm happy to expand on things in a power hour or a video if I get requests for it to go in more detail for the topics that are making brains hurt and stuff. Moto Vapor, this power hour is awesome. Thank you for your help and sharing your knowledge with us. Thank you for joining us. Obi-Wan, what's up with that bent cap? It's a flat brim. Mike Burr, $5. Thank you, Mooch. Thank you for the super chat. That will buy a cell for testing, so that's always good. And Greg Smith, yes, sir, the Vindicator. Yeah, okay, that's what I thought. So Mike Burr, thank you. I appreciate that. Dave Satek, it's awesome, but battery guy to keep us safe. Much respect. And that bend in your bill of your hat is epic. Well, you people keep talking about my hat being bent. I don't know what you're talking about. Dave, thank you. Tracy Thompson, thank you. I was trying to study from your Minding Your Mars episodes. I want to get into mech. Ah, okay. Yeah, I'm trying to think who's got good intro to mech. It's kind of spread out with all the reviewers. You may have to just do searches for some of the channels and intros to mechs and things like that. I don't do a step back. Here's everything about mechs and mech safety and stuff like that. I kind of dive into other topics related to the questions I get from people who are already trying to do things with mechs. We'll go a little bit more, just a few minutes. Robin, I caught your message, but put my name in the beginning. That's the only way I can be guaranteed to see that. @ battery space Mooch. That way it's tagged in red and I can see it in chat very clearly. So Robin Waldron asks, what's the best 18650 21700 charger? They all seem to charge at 1 amp. I think that's not good for battery life. I don't have a recommendation for chargers. They're all so different. And what I want in a charger is so different from what you might want. Some people want lots of data on the display. Some people just want a freaking green and red LED, and that's it. Nothing to confuse them. Some people want, 2 slots. Some people need 8. So I have got no recommendations for them. Where are you? Here we go. Especially in terms of best, that determines so much on features. I can send you to follow the link to my blog at ECF in the description section. Click on the link for my charger test, and you can read the summaries for a bunch of charger tests and try to narrow it down to 2 or 3 chargers, and then read the full test report and see, like, okay, the things that I hate are small and the things that I love are big. This is the charger for me. But 1 amp, for most of the batteries you use, 1 amp is fine. On some chargers, though, the night cores run hot. 1 amp, if you fill all the slots, gets the batteries hot. Not because 1 amp's bad for the battery, but because the charger has to work so hard delivering 1 amp to all the batteries, it just heats up all the batteries, and that's bad for them. So getting a charger that doesn't heat up the battery can make a big difference as to how you charge those batteries. If it runs cool at 2 amps, a lot of batteries can be fine at 2 amps. But if it runs at hot at half an amp, now you're stuck charging at a quarter amp just because you don't want your batteries to age because the charger makes them hot, which is very frustrating. Brad Palmer, can you say what batteries are originally intended for? Is a VTC 5A meant for Dyson? I don't think the 5A was for Dyson. It was meant for power tools and electric vacuum cleaners, that type of application, but I don't know if it was designed specifically for Dyson. That kind of information, these companies are going to really hold on tight unless you open up a Dyson pack. You might find on YouTube or something, people cracking open Dyson packs, they'll tell you what cells inside. You can go, oh, okay, maybe it was. Some people said, hey, VTC5D. What's the D for? I don't know. It could be argued, oh, okay, they took the 5A, they tweaked it, they made the D for Dyson. I don't know. Robert Riggin shows us proper battery usage and proper bill bending. None of that flat bill. Tags attached nonsense. Chris, 10 quid. Big thanks, Mooch. I don't see any bend in the hat. Not sure what they're talking about. Thank you very much for the super chat. I really appreciate that. Bogan has a good video on mechs for beginners. Awesome. That's good. Duncan Yo-Yo, I just want accurate CCCV and accurate termination voltage. Yeah, the charging current doesn't matter as much, the accuracy. Termination voltage, heck yeah. There's a big difference in battery life between like 4.2 and 4.25 volts, 50 thousandths of a volt. If you can stop at like 4.15, very little capacity loss, nice increase in battery life. 4.1, huge increase in battery life, but now you're losing 10, 15% of your capacity. Scott Bogfoot, how close do you live to the Zool building in the original Ghostbusters movie? I'm about a mile away. It's in my neighborhood on the Upper West Side, and near the Hudson River. Central Park is across about a third of Manhattan, and that's on Central Park, borders Central Park. But I used to see it every time I go running through the park. You can see the towers and everything. Tracy Thompson also is a MOSFET considered mech mod or regulated? I have a Motley's mod, build your own, but someone said I need to know amps and voltage drop, figure to ask. Well, a MOSFET is not regulated, but it's not a mech either. It is unregulated. And all unregulated mods, you need to treat like a mech when it comes to Ohm's law, because you don't have a regulated circuit board with a power setting that determines what the battery current is. And any unregulated mod, MOSFET or full mech or something in between, the battery current is determined by the coil. So now you need to use Ohm's law to work out what that coil is drawing from it. Even if you've got a PWM mod where you're adjusting it and it's pulsing the current into it, you still need to know what your worst case battery current is if it's at 100%. So you still need to know Ohm's law. For a regulated mod, you're using Watt's law, versions of Ohm's law. Minding Your Mouse episode 3, I go into some of that, but you don't need to use regular Ohm's law for a regulated mod. In fact, it won't work for you. Motor Vapor. I hope this industry grows strong, that a cell company will make a battery especially for vaping. I don't think that's going to happen, but luckily we can use, you have to sit back and say, well, what is a battery especially for vaping? We don't need anything different than a good power tool battery. Or not even just a good power bank battery for low power vapors and a good power tool battery for high power vapors. What we need is more safety. Maybe that's the definition of a better battery for vaping. But they're going to do that anyway with solid state batteries and things like that. So I think we can still ride on the other coattails. But right now, we're just too small. Like you allude to, we're just too small to spend the millions of dollars to come up with a battery with, because we do have low power vapors, high power vapors, and stuff like that. Justin Vickers, have you ever used the Pila IBC charger? No, I haven't. I still use mine. First good charger 10 years ago. Wow. And you see, that's what I think the minimum lifespan for a charger should be, 10 years. If I built a charger and it failed in 10 years, I'd be really pissed off, because that's completely unacceptable. In 15, 20 years or something, if a connector was wearing out or something like that, okay. But a failure? No. But that's just the way I like to design a product. Dave's Okay, let's call it two more questions. Dave and Captain Kirk TM. That'll be it. I just recently bought the Geyer Falcon. It's Geyer, isn't it? Or is it Gear? I like Geyer. Falcon 8-bay charger. It seems to run all batteries cool at 1 amp. That's awesome. What's my favorite charger and why? My favorite charger is a constant current, constant voltage power supply that I have, 60 amp, 30 volts, because I can dial in whatever current I want and whatever voltage I want and charge the batteries. So that's my favorite. I don't have a favorite for the commercial round cell chargers, standard charger, not a power supply that I use for charging. I've heard good things about the Geyer Falcon. If I had more money, I'd buy a pair and test them, because I've heard really good things about them. But being able to charge, does it charge 8 cells at 1 amp, 8 amps total? That'd be fantastic. But for me, it would be something like maybe the Dragon, but spring, like after a few hundred charges, the springs are getting stiff as hell. But I like the adjustability. That's something I look for in a charger. I want to be able to adjust everything. So I'll use the Dragon to XR Dragon when I want to charge like LFP batteries, lithium ferrous phosphate batteries that have a lower voltage. That I'll bring the Dragon out because I can have that adjustability. Okay, Justin, you'll be the last question. Captain Kirk TM, would it be possible for us to get the loose cells we use every day in a protected battery pack? Maybe that would, I guess, get the battery companies off our back. Yeah, if we have protected battery packs, they don't care, because that's what these cells are supposed to be used for. That's what they're made for. That's the only authorized use in a fully protected battery pack. Something like the Anakin disruptor that had, it's out there, that had, this box and the single 18650 in there with a little circuit board and 2 burly connectors. That's exactly what we need. But then to get the manufacturers to use it, that's the hard part. But that would, I think, get all the manufacturers to go, okay, we're fine. You can use our batteries. In fact, we'll be happy to sell them to you now. So that is another option. And that may be the way the market's being forced to go into. If can't get loose cells, we have to either have battery packs or go to internal battery only devices. Justin, you're the last question. Does that constant current power supply auto terminate, or do you have to babysit it? You actually, it won't auto terminate. I come back when I think it's about right. Batteries, let's say I'm charging at 2 amps. Most chargers would turn off at 200 milliamps, but I can see how much current it's drawing when I'm just walking around. When I see it drop down to about zero point 0.2 amps or 200 milliamps, or sometime after that, I'll take it off. Obviously, I'm not doing any kind of accurate testing. I'm just getting batteries charged up that way. For accurate cutoffs and stuff like that, I'll use the Dragon, where I'll say, hey, I'm testing these cells. I need them all charged to exactly the same point. Or I use an iCharger, B6 Plus, IB6 Plus, as part of my test rig to bring batteries up to exactly the same point. So when I discharge them, they're all exactly the same starting capacity. But you're right. With just using a power supply, it'll just keep charging and charging and charging the cell to lower and lower and lower and lower current at the end as it tops off the battery, and you can keep charging for days. And there's still a little bit of current going into it as the ions find the little nooks and crannies. That's it. Esco, thanks for a good show again. Thank you. You had two dragons fail on you? Okay. Yeah, I mean, it's got great features, but it's Robert Reagan, but uh, I'm disappointed that I can only get a few hundred springs out of that. Now, I practically have to get my body weight to pull them down. And I've opened it up. It's not lubrication type issue or something like that. Okay, I want to thank everybody for coming by, for joining us in chat. The number, I've got a few people watching us. The number has slightly gone up, but Jay had come on about a half hour before I did, so I know that will always be people checking out Jay, and that's totally cool because I can always come back here and watch my live stream later. So thank you, everyone, for joining us. Thank you those who had the super chat. I also want to totally thank Walter J. Robbins and Scott Runyon, two of my patrons, who came up with the Power Hour name for the show. I think that was brilliant. It's clever as hell. Thank you, sirs, for coming up with this name and allowing me to steal it and use it for the show. And thank you, everybody, for joining us. It looks like this will be it too. It looks like I might do. Actually, I should ask you. Noon, Wednesdays. Okay, or maybe 1 or 2 is better because it's better for the West Coast. Sunday night, I think, will be the other power hour before another the vape show at 7 p.m. I would come on from 7 to 8 p.m. But Vans 1208, thank you very much for the super chat. Thanks, Mooch. Take care. Thank you. I really appreciate that. So, is noon better, or would 1 or 2 p.m. be better? So, because the West Coast then be a little better. It's not as good for the East Coast, but maybe a little better for the West Coast. So maybe 1 o'clock. Would that be better? For Scott, 1 or 2 is better. Let me know in chat. We got 114 watching. Let's see, 30 or 40 entries here for what time is better. Let's say 12, 1, or 2. I got a couple for 1 or 2. There's another 2 o'clock. I don't know where the delay on this is. I guess I have to wait 40. For Matt, Eastern time, 1 or 2 p.m. Eastern time, as opposed to, thank you, as opposed to noon Eastern time. Bill Richards, good point. Noon is better for the UK, as later there are live UK shows. Bill Richards, how about 1 hour later than now? Almost everybody is saying 1 or 2 p.m. is better. And, if 1 p.m. isn't a disaster, what would that be, 6 p.m. UK? All right, so I think, Serge, you're in Kuwait. Please keep the same time. Okay. Right now, though, it's looking like I may stall a little bit. Almost everybody else is saying 1 or 2 p.m. I think next week we'll do it at 1. A lot of people are saying 2 p.m. though. That works better here. I don't want to. Yeah, I should just do it every day and pick a new time every day. Nobody would watch though. Need a little time for people to build the questions in. Joaquin or Joaquin, 2 a.m. 2 a.m. midnight? Or it starts at midnight and it's almost 2 a.m. now. Okay, yeah, that's true. Yeah, for Asia. Um, Going later would be brutal. 24/7 live stream. Yeah, that would be interesting. All right, everybody. So maybe we'll try 1 o'clock next week and see how that works out. But meantime, it's next one will be 7 p.m. Um, Billy, you're right. You know, but for me, actually, a little bit later is better on things. I'm often scrambling with phone calls and all kinds of stuff in the morning, so 1 p.m. actually can work a little better for me. So yeah, Mike Berg, 12:30, uh, or no, I don't want to just go live whenever. It's good for the day. I'd like to schedule things because it helps people schedule around it. Okay, we'll see what next week turns into. Everybody, thank you for joining us. Thank you for the chat. Thank you those who donated via super chat, and we'll see all of you maybe Sunday night, if not next Wednesday. 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 Take care. Thanks for watching.